Birthright citizenship. That's what the Supreme Court has just ruled. This is not on the actual executive order, but they ruled on how the court should implement though. Now, at this point of time, I want to give a summary that what the Supreme Court said is that until July 27th, whoever is being born in United States, no matter which state they are being born in, they will be given the US citizenship. The federal government will grant them the passport. The federal government will give them the birth certificate, and state governments will give the birth certificate. Cities will give the birth certificate until July 27th. Now, after July 27th, of course, we're going to discuss. Emily, can you give the basics of where did this citizenship birthright issue came up, and when was the executive order issue?
Yeah, so pretty much the first thing Trump did when he took office was issue Executive Order 14160, which sought to end birthright citizenship. This is something that he ran on in his campaign. Notably, during his campaign, he always talked about ending birthright citizenship for undocumented immigrants. However, when it actually came into fruition, and he issued the executive order, it included kids of legal immigrants, those on non-immigrant visas. So that's why we're talking about that today. So issued in January, it was set to take effect February 19th, 2025. That's why that date is important. But it was immediately challenged in court in multiple states, in multiple courts, by multiple different parties, some class, some state, some individuals, lots of lawsuits. And as a result of those lawsuits, various courts issued nationwide injunctions saying that we think that this executive order is likely to be found unconstitutional. Therefore, while we're deciding on whether it is unconstitutional and we go through the full court process, we are going to block it from being implemented. That's the nationwide injunction. So that meant that kids born after February 19th, 2025 would still be counted as US citizens while this injunction was in place. Now, those injunctions were issued by the lowest courts in the land. And so, of course, the government appealed those decisions, and then that worked its way up to the Supreme Court. And what we got a decision on today was the Supreme Court deciding whether the injunctions temporarily blocking this executive order were correct or not. And they came up with kind of a curveball and basically said they don't think that a nationwide injunction is proper. They're referring it to kind of a universal injunction, saying that, you can't have one person bring a lawsuit in, one district court in one state, and all of a sudden now it's blocked nationwide. So that being said, we are back to square one that this executive order could actually go into effect July 27th. So the court gave us 30 days for further action. Now, what's going to happen between now and July 27th? If nobody does anything, beginning July 27th, kids born after that date may not automatically become citizens. However, we think there's a lot that's going to happen between those dates, and we still don't have an actual decision on whether this executive order is constitutional or not. This is just deciding whether we're going to block it or not while we decide. So we're still at the very early stages. Stephen, if you want to add in there and try to make it a little easier to understand, because I know that was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've been talking to people today about this, Emily Rahul, is just don't think about this as the birthright citizenship case. Think about this as the nationwide injunction case. And I know the impact is, people are really stressed and birthright citizenship and all that, but this could have been the traffic light violation case, okay, for all it matters. The case today only dealt with procedure of nationwide injunctions and when they may or may not be appropriate. There's still ways they might be appropriate. For the most part, they would be inappropriate. And so nothing is decided on the legality of birthright citizenship Like I said, you just drop birthright citizenship, and today's decision is solely a procedural one. And so that's the way to think about this. This case is already moving quick. The groups that filed this original lawsuit, within about, I don't know, 3 hours of the Supreme Court decision, filed an amended complaint, essentially changing up their lawsuit to now put in class claims. Why? Because the idea of this case is that, Emily can't go sue and then get a ruling that applies to everybody at the preliminary stage. All right. But Emily could represent a class of people that are the same, set of factors, and get, injunctive relief for the class. Okay. And so the group that's already fighting this already has filed an amended complaint seeking class certification. So, and I'll turn it back over to Rahul, but I almost feel like, Rahul and Emily, this is going to be something we're doing updates weekly on, with how these lawsuits are going. What are these policies? Because, part of this is they've got 30 days to come up with what is Department of State going to do to implement? What's Homeland Security going to do to implement? We still don't know. We're going to answer a lot of questions today, but as best we can. But this is going to be evolving daily, weekly, until we kind of get a resolution 2 years from now from the Supreme Court on the merits even. I don't know.
So Stephen and Emily, these are my questions though. As far as what we agree upon right now is no matter where the person is born, if they are born in USA, no matter which state they are born in, until July 27th, they will be given US citizenship. Now, the only question is after July 27th is the question which is a little bit in the gray area, whether Stephen is certain and Emily is certain that there will be some changes from now onwards to July 27th, where we will have some clear guidelines to have a nationwide policy. Hopefully so, is what you guys are telling. But let's say so right now I have to tell all the people that if the child is getting born before July 27th, absolutely not a problem. If the child is getting born after July 27th, we want you to keep watching us. Is that what you're telling, Emily and Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, we have to figure out, the lower court, everything goes back to the lower courts. And for all those lower courts that issued the nationwide injunctions, they're going to have to go back and issue a new injunction that is more targeted to, the people that brought the lawsuit. So in some cases, it was a state that brought the lawsuit. And so the state got a nationwide injunction that goes away, but now the state might get a statewide injunction. And we have at least 3 states that will likely see that happen. But then the next step is going to be, okay, if we have 3 states that have an injunction that says that kids born here can still be US citizens while this whole court case plays out, and we have a number of other states that don't have an injunction, how is that going to possibly work as a nation where one state you're a citizen and one state you're not? It's not going to work. It's completely impractical, and no one thinks that that's actually going to happen. And for that reason, those states will likely probably still get nationwide injunctions. It's just going to be done in a different way, a different procedural mechanism. So I do feel somewhat confident that after July 27th, this will still be enjoined nationwide one way or another. But we'll have to wait and see what happens in the next 30 days to be sure on that. And then again, we still won't have a decision on the actual merits of the case, whether an executive order can end birthright citizenship. We will not have an answer on that for some time. So it's going to be lots of things in limbo temporarily.
Yeah. And, just to kind of, I know overall, I told you I wouldn't bore people with the background here.
Technicalities.
Yes, the technicalities. Excuse me. Somebody asked about born before July 27th, but not applying to the passport until after. What does that look like? The original executive order was written and says this will take effect as of 30 days from the date of the order. Okay. And so the original executive order was like, I want to say like January 21st or something. It was very early. And so anybody born between that issuance and 30 days, they were a citizen. A passport doesn't confer citizenship, at least in the United States. It's proof of citizenship, but it doesn't confer citizenship. And
So
so,
practically, what you're telling Stephen is that
okay,
if the person is born before July 27th, even if they don't apply the passport before July 27th, they can still get the passport.
yeah, if they're born
Okay.
July 26th at 11:59 at night, they would be a U.S. citizen. Let's assume this goes wrong. And then on July 27th, they wouldn't be, but they would for that. And so the Supreme Court says at the very bottom of the majority opinion, and this is 119 pages, only 32 pages are the majority opinion, says, consistent with the Solicitor General's representations, that's the government representations, the executive order shall not take effect until 30 days after the date of this opinion. So that's where we're getting this July 27th date from. You're not going to go find July 27th, just on Google or maybe even Chat GPT unless it does the math. But it's basically not going to be implemented for 30 days from today.
So for those people who are worried about whether they're going to get the passport, it's as long as the child is born by July 26th at 11:59 p.m., they're good. They can apply passport even in August. That's perfectly okay. Even if it takes time, that's perfectly all right. It's the question is only, but Emily and Stephen are certain that we're going to get more clear guidelines from now onwards to July 27th. Please keep tuned. And class action shoot. Stephen has been involved in a lot of class action shoots. What is it involved? Of course, the states are going to go for class action suit. When the class action suit is applicable, it is applicable to everybody who is in that class. So not to the particular individual. So you are the litigation lawyer, Stephen,
Yeah.
and you have been involved in a lot of class action suits. You have sued the U.S. government and won many times. So why don't you tell what
Yeah.
is a class action suit? How fast can that be achieved?
Well, so funny story. I pulled up Pacer while we started this call to see what the, primary case on this in Maryland, Casa Inc. Et al. V. Trump et al. They amended their complaint within a few hours. They allege a class. Here they define the class as all children who have been born or will be born in the United States on or after February 19th, 2025, who are designated by Executive Order 14160 to be ineligible for birthright citizenship and their parents. So, what does that mean? All right. Anybody who's impacted by this executive order, any child or their parents, are members of this putative class. Why is it a putative class? Because the class isn't certified. The court has to go in and now and this is why I pulled up Pacer. They've already moved to certify the class. This has got to show that there is a number, that there's numerosity, that they have a similarity in interests and legal claims. All right. And then there's other factors that go into it. I think they're going to get a class, but it might be how it's, defined. And then they've already filed an emergency temporary restraining order on behalf of the class. And all this is today. And so when I say this is going to change daily, I wouldn't be surprised if next week we have this temporary restraining order for a class. Well, guess what? The government's going to appeal that too. Why? Because if they lose it, which I think they will, they're going to appeal either the class or the TRO or how a TRO applies to a class or whatever. And so this is going to be for anybody that's interested in civil procedure and you're a nerd like that, and I got you, this is going to be an interesting case because of the procedure. This is going to be fought for a long time, but they're moving the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection, and all this. There's a bunch of groups doing this as well as states. And again, the class is very broadly defined.
Okay, so how long does the court take to certify the class? How long does the Massachusetts court might take to give a decision on this one?
So this,
First, they have to certify the class, and afterwards, the arguments will start. How long will it take for them to give
yeah.
an
So
injunction?
this is the District Court of Maryland is the one I'm looking at. It's Casa Inc.
Sorry.
v.
Yeah,
Trump.
yeah.
Yeah. There's one in Massachusetts as well. So, but that's the one I pulled up here. They can move quick. Again, they are asking for an injunction that prohibits defendants from implementing or enforcing the executive order 14160 against anyone who is part of the putative class. And they're asking for immediate relief because they're asking for a TRO and preliminary injunction. They could have a decision Monday. They could have a decision Tuesday, because a TRO is immediate irreparable harm, likelihood of success on the merits, and I think you can show both of those, right? I think they're gonna have likelihood of success on the merits, and then I think you can show what the immediate irreparable harm is. Now, maybe the judge says, "Hey, this is gonna be 30 days from now. There's not immediate irreparable harm." And they can look at a preliminary injunction instead of the TRO. I still very much feel like we're going to have something from the court that slows this down within the next 30 days.
Emily, do you think so? They're going to appeal it? What's afterwards?
Yeah, so I would expect that, we will get class certification or not within the next 30 days. And then we will get some new injunction or not within the next 30 days. And both sides will appeal, whoever wins or loses on those. So we could be back up to the Supreme Court about a new injunction before they ever get to the merits again. So this is a very long going process, but I do think it's very likely that something will change by July 27th. We'll have some kind of decisions from the district courts with new injunctions of some sort by July 27th. And I just want to point out, RK on our YouTube channel made the exact correct comment that the goal of the lawsuit was to limit district court judges giving these nationwide injunctions. It has, where we're at right now has nothing to do with birthright citizenship. This was all about trying to stop courts from blocking Trump tactics. What they don't realize is that if this goes on, it's going to block Democrats from being able to do what they want to do too. So it's going to cut both ways. So it's just, we're all procedural right now, and we will have something that will block this by July 27th. I feel confident.
And it's interesting in RK, I think, very insightful. Justice Sotomayor mentions that in her minority opinion. She mentions like this was gamesmanship by the administration. They bifurcated this. They attacked the procedure, not the merits on appeal. So that way they could fast track the procedure. And look, we know the Trump administration doesn't like nationwide injunctions. I mean, Stephen Miller seemed to like it when he was getting it against the Biden administration. But now it seems to be something that's not okay to have. And so, that's the whole issue today. And the argument they had a few weeks ago was nationwide injunctions. And it is couched in birthright citizenship because that's the case. But like I said, it could have been a nationwide injunction to stop red light cameras. And it would be the same result today.
So there is a class action suit, is it right? In the class action suit, it could apply for the nationwide. You have done it, Stephen, a couple of times, where the H4 EADs and L2s and certain things where you apply class action suit, that was applicable across the nation. Now, if the class action suit has been certified, though, then practically this judgment, and then the district court gives the judgment, then practically we are back to where we were when the district court granted the injunction. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
So all right now in the technicality, the district court need to do is to certify the class that all the children born in United States on or afterwards February 19th of 2025 are one class of people. They could be represented by one set of lawyers. And then if they grant an injunction, then what's the difference between that?
It's procedural, right? What
Yeah.
there are differences in class litigation and what you have to show to get a class versus getting a nationwide injunction. And like I said, what they don't want is, and I'll use the example that the Republicans used. They would file a lawsuit in Amarillo, Texas, where the Northern District of Texas has one judge who is a Trump appointee, and that judge would enjoin things nationally, that were Biden policies. And it cuts both ways. We know that people that don't like things Trump are doing are going to the Northeast or to the West Coast, filing out there. And it could be, like I said, it could be one individual saying, well, this impacts me, and get it enjoined nationally. And there's an argument to be made, a very philosophical legal argument about whether that is appropriate. That is different
I got it.
than a class.
Okay. So right now, this definitely is going to be a class action suit. I will be very, very surprised that if this is not going to be classified as a class action, which you said, Stephen, in the in Maryland court, is right. They already requested for certification of the class. So if they do, and they do grant injunction, then it will be nationwide.
Yeah, and you have to show four things for a class. You have to have numerosity. Courts often look at around, 40 or so, but there's no hard number. It could be 10. It could be, 5 is a class. Well, there's definitely more than 40 people that are parents or children born after that time that would be impacted. Commonality, where they have the same harm or same legal issues, that's there. The typicality, how typical are their claims to the entire class, that's there. It's the same, thing. And then adequacy, how can everybody be adequately represented? Well, I think if anybody that has a concern about birthright citizenship, a decision overturning the executive order is adequately represented. So again, I think they'll get a class. Now, it could be different on how it's defined, that's for sure. But we'll see what it looks like kind of moving forward.
Emily, one question that I have is that will the class action will have, hey, class action, when they classify the class action, that the commonality, will they have a commonality that, hey, Texas kids will be different than that of California, Emily?
Golly, I hope not, thankfully. Texans would probably say, no, they're completely different. But I think when you look at their DNA, they're probably all pretty darn similar and would all count. So yeah, I think one of the comments was, does this mean a baby born in California will be a citizen, but not in Texas because Texas doesn't have its own lawsuit? I think there's a very low chance of that happening because we're going for not just states litigating, but we're also moving forward with class litigation, and that class would include nationwide kids in that situation.
And even from like a result oriented, I mean, that's just going back to like the 1700s where, I was born in Virginia, so you're a citizen, and, maybe I have different rights than somebody born in New York. And that's just not the American immigration and nationality system. It is universal no matter where you live. And so I think people are going to be concerned about that because that is a weird route that I guess it could take. I just don't think it's going to go that way.
So we definitely want everybody who may be affected to be tuned in to our news channel so that we keep on giving update. And what Emily and Stephen has already pointed out was that class certification was already been filed in Maryland court. And most probably what he's telling, we may get a class certification and or a preliminary injunction or a permanent injunction next week. Is it right, Stephen?
I mean,
Yeah.
I'd imagine we'll see something next week on this, and then definitely within the next 4 weeks. I mean, we're talking about something that is very egregious. So
Yeah,
Anything
and
else,
just
Emily?
to again reiterate that kids born before July 27th, no impact at all. They are citizens. After July 27th, we will wait and see, but we expect there to be updates for sure.
And real
Okay.
quick, Harsh asked a question on YouTube. Birth certificate, a valid proof of citizenship. Have a birth certificate for a kid, but haven't applied for a U.S. passport. That's part of what we have to see on the guidance that they're going to create. It should, especially anybody born already. But let's say this all gets slow played, and we're talking about July 28th. Differently, I think apply for the passport and see, what that goes. But Harsh, you shouldn't have any issues for your child.
Anything else, Emily? Anything else, Stephen?
Nope.
Thank you for tuning in, guys. We do bring in any emergency updates. Just subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our newsletters. We have a 30 FAQs that we have published in our website. You can also read that at our NLaw group, and then you can go to the blog. We publish the same Q&As there so that you guys can read on it. Thank you.